Hey everyone, welcome back to the Athlete Spine. It's Dr. Namani and Dr. Louie, and we're here today with Kaitlin Rawson, who is a pole sports athlete all the way from South Africa. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And we're really excited to have Kaitlin on today because Kaitlin has had a remarkable recovery from an injury that she suffered 6 years ago while competing. And nothing short of amazing, what she's been able to do and what she's been able to come back to. And so we're really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and so we posted on Instagram a story and sort of several posts of sort of your process and your journey along the way. And we got a lot of feedback about it, and people were really interested, and they were they jumped on your bandwagon, really cheering for like your recovery along the way. So we're excited for this today. So tell us how this all started, what happened, and yeah.
So I was in a pole class. I was in the middle of actually training for my first competition that I was ever going to enter. And I was just in a regular group class with a whole bunch of other people. And there was one particular move that I was doing where you're kind of upside down, hanging on from just the back of your thigh. And it was a really freak thing, but my grip in my leg just slipped and I landed on my neck. So I kind of was upside down in a back bend, and I landed on the front of my neck with my feet kind of going over towards my head. And something about the angle that I landed at and the pressure caused my vertebra to burst. And you can see on my x-ray, it was all in hundreds of tiny little pieces, which was not great, obviously. So from that kind of instance, I was immediately paralyzed, couldn't feel anything, couldn't move anything. And that was really obviously scary because it's your worst fear of if you fall, what could happen? It's I could be paralyzed. And it was that instant moment of oh no, I can't move. So from that, I had to obviously be taken to hospital. There were obviously paramedics that came. I had to have the whole brace around my neck, the collar, they had to stabilize everything and take me to hospital. I was initially taken to a hospital that was quite close to where the injury happened. And then they actually flew me via helicopter to another hospital where there was a neurosurgeon who was then able to operate on me. I got a piece of metal put into my neck and a C4 to C6 fusion because it was C5 that burst. And then after the surgery, I started working with physios pretty much immediately, the next day afterwards, to try and get me able to move and walk and do all the things that I need to do again.
Yeah, I mean, if we take a step back to your injury, I mean, I can only imagine how scary that must be. And, you're going from preparing for a highly competitive event to wondering if you're going to be moving your arms and legs again. I can sort of a devastating feeling. That type of fracture we see in these sort of high impact sports sometimes, and we've talked about it in a couple of episodes as well. And it's crazy, actually, the spectrum of the injury itself. Just because you have a fracture doesn't mean you become paralyzed, right? We see some people who've had these cervical or vertebral fractures from these types of injuries, and it's just that. The concern with your injury is part of your fracture fragments shot posteriorly. They shot back into your spinal canal and provided this immediate severe compression to your spinal cord, which controls a lot of what goes on in your arms and legs, like pain and sensation and strength. And at the very end of the spectrum and severity, sometimes you can see this very temporary paralysis where you can't feel or you can't move anything. And something you brought up was really important, was how quickly people worked to get you to where you need to be to get surgery as fast as you could.
Yeah, and I think it's usually high level athletes who are in sports where there's the potential for significant collision or trauma that get these injuries, so kind of like you falling from a height directly onto your head and neck, was unfortunately what caused, the severity of the injury, so and how was the operation for you? Do you remember any of that time period, or was this all kind of a blur?
I actually remember like quite a lot. Obviously, I don't remember the operation itself because I was unconscious for that part, but I remember like everything leading up to it, even to like right being in the operating room and the surgeon kind of like explaining to me that he was going to put me under the anesthetic and kind of what was going to happen. In terms of like moving from like one hospital to the other, like the main thing that I remember was just like, even though I couldn't feel anything, I had like this pain, and like it was weirdly in my hip. And it was so strange for me because like I was like so confused. I was like, I think I've broken my hip or something as well, like in the fall. And I didn't know like how or what. And I was like telling like the doctors and nurses while they were working on me, like, I think like there's something wrong with my hip. Can you x-ray my hip as well? Like there's something wrong. It's like this, like it was like an intense, like searing pain in my hip, which I now know was like a nerve pain, but that was like the only thing that I felt. And so that's one of the things that like I remember most.
Yeah. And how soon after surgery did you start to notice some improvement in the numbness and weakness and the other symptoms you were feeling?
It was almost immediate. Like, as I remember, as I was coming like out of surgery and like waking up afterwards, I could like start to kind of move my hand a little bit. And like that was like a huge like relief for me, because obviously going into the surgery, they had told they didn't really tell me much, I think because I was like the trauma patient that they were like just worried about getting me stable. But they had spoken to my parents. I was young at the time. I was only 19. I turned 19 in the hospital a few days after. So they spoke to my parents mostly about everything, and they had told them like, look, there's a chance that she could be completely paralyzed after the surgery. She might not ever be able to move or walk again. So when we saw that my hand was moving, it was like a huge relief of like, okay, there's a chance that I'll be able to recover.
Yeah. Do you remember what they told you in terms of what to expect from your recovery? You know, I know they talked to your parents about like, hey, you may not walk again, but what's your recollection of the expectations and the recovery discussion that you had before?
So after the surgery, the doctors were very kind of vague about what I could expect. They really, I think, were trying not to get my hopes up too high. They were telling me, look, you'll do the physio, you'll spend time in the rehabilitation hospital, and we'll kind of see what happens, and hopefully you'll be able to regain some movement and some function, but we really can't tell you much. So that was something that I had to kind of, grapple with being in hospital, was trying to keep like the hope for myself like alive, and be like, I'm going to like work hard and do all my exercises with the physios to make sure that I can like have the best chance possible of recovering, on also not knowing if that was even possible.
What was the hardest part of the recovery for you?
For me, it was like the boredom of being in hospital. I spent 3 months in a rehabilitation hospital, which was actually a lot quicker than they were expecting. They told me initially like probably at least a year in the rehabilitation hospital, but luckily I was able to get out much sooner. But it was really boring. Like the only thing to do in hospital was physio. So I went, like, I had physio sessions in the morning and in the afternoon. I went to my physio sessions, and then I kind of just sat around, and often I would like then end up doing like extra exercises, seeing when else I could go down to the gym, because there wasn't really much else to do. So I think that also did help like with my motivation to like recover. Like I really wanted to sort of like recover quickly and get as much function back as possible, so that I could just get out of hospital and go home.
I think what you're describing is something that we've experienced, is that athletes tend to have this really goal-oriented way in which they undergo their rehab and recovery from these serious injuries. And, they don't settle for, well, I hope I'm going to get back. They set a goal and they say, I'm going to get there no matter what anyone else tells me. And so that's really what you've described is exactly what I think many athletes have when they go into the recovery from an injury like this.
And that's part of the hard part for us. Like, we know that the goals of a surgery for your type of injury is we need to decompress the spinal cord and give room for the nerves. And then we need to stabilize your spine so that everything can heal and we decrease the risk of an injury. And we can do this type of surgery over and over and over again. And we like to think that we're getting better at it as a field. But, before the surgery and after surgery, we have to look someone like you in the eye and say, you know what? I have no idea how much better you're going to get. I have no idea how fast you're going to recover. I don't have any idea of what the final outcome will look like, nor how long it's going to take. Like you said, you saw a faster recovery early on, and we tell our patients, you can expect most of your recovery in the first 18 to 24 months after this type of injury and surgery. But tell us how your activities have progressed since that time, and how soon you're able to walk and use your arms and
So walking, they literally had me out of the hospital bed on the next day after surgery. So the physios, they were really good with getting me up and moving as soon as possible. So I wasn't really walking by myself, but I was kind of propped up with one physio on either side of me, and they were kind of moving my legs for me, but just getting that kind of sensation of being up and being out of the hospital bed and moving around. It took, I want to say about 3 or 4 weeks before I was able to kind of walk mostly by myself, or with a walking frame. And then it was only a couple of weeks before I was pretty much doing everything that I needed to do to kind of survive by myself. So I was feeding myself, I was lifting my own water bottle to drink, because that was something in the beginning was really difficult, where I was reliant on someone else for absolutely everything. I couldn't brush my teeth by myself or brush my hair by myself. So as soon as I got that level of independence, and that was a few weeks, it was a really big milestone for me in terms of, okay, I'm actually seeing progress. I'm actually going to be able to live by myself after this.
Yeah, and that must have been really scary, especially in those first few weeks, kind of not knowing where you're going to ultimately get to, for someone as young and as active as you, the fear of the unknown in terms of, am I going to need to rely on other people, for the rest of my life? And I think now you're years out from this injury, and you've really come a tremendous way and are back to competing in your sport, which is really remarkable. And you just mentioned to us that you just got back from a big competition. So I think it'd be interesting just to hear about what you're doing now and what your sport involves and what level you've been able to get back to.
Yeah, so I compete in pole sports, and specifically, I compete under the International Pole Sports Federation for world pole and aerial. So they kind of govern internationally all the major national competitions, and then they have a world event once a year, which is what I've just come back from, and that went really well. I got the gold medal in that, and I broke the world record.
All right, congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm pretty pleased with that. But basically what it involves, I have to kind of choreograph a routine on 2 different poles, one that spins and one that's static, and it involves a whole bunch of different compulsory elements, so flexibility moves, strength moves, kind of choreograph a routine on 2 different poles, one that spins and one that's static, and it involves spins, all sorts of things like that. And Worlds is obviously the big competition that I go to. This is my 3rd year competing at Worlds now. It was cancelled in 2020 because of the pandemic, but 2019, 2021, and then this year I've done it. And then there's Nationals, which is the qualifying event for that. And for these competitions, I compete in the ParaPole division for athletes with reduced muscle power, but that are able to walk. So it's anyone who has any sort of kind of condition or spinal cord injury or anything that's going to affect their nerves and their muscles, essentially. But then I also do compete with athletes who don't have any disabilities in other competitions. So in South Africa, where I am, there's not a lot of competitions that offer specialized divisions for people with injuries or disabilities. So I kind of, because I want to compete as much as possible and also just push myself to do as much as I possibly can, I compete in regular competitions just with everyone else. And I kind of know what my limitations are in terms of what I'm going to lose marks for. One thing with my injury is, because especially the right side of my body is quite affected still with the kind of nervous system, and that is I really struggle to point my right foot, which is because pole sports is a form of dancing essentially. That's really important. So I often get points deducted in competitions because of that. But I kind of know that that's gonna happen.
I guess one of the last questions that we had for you today is, you suffered this injury during a practice, and you at some point made the decision to go right back into the sport again. What drove that decision? And, what was going through your head when you were deciding, yeah, you know what, like this is really scary. It's changed my life. I'm going to go right back at it again.
I think that like it wasn't so much of like a decision. It was just like I always knew that I was going to go back to it. Like from that moment I spoke about when I was able to move my hand for the first time, and I was like, okay, wow, like there's actually a chance that I'm going to recover. I was like, I'm going to go back to pole. And that was one of the main like motivating things of like getting me through like my physio sessions every day and getting me through that time in hospital, was like, I'm going to get back to doing what I love, because it is like my passion in life. And I just couldn't imagine not. Like, it was one of the things that was like the most difficult during that time when I wasn't really sure if I was going to recover, was like, okay, what if I'm not able to compete again? What if I'm not able to do this thing that I love? And I kind of just pushed that thought to the side and was like, right, this is my goal. I'm going to focus on getting back in whatever form I can to being able to do pole dancing again.
That's really tremendous. And I think I read also that this is a family affair, that your mother as well is involved in pole.
Yeah, so we started together as like a fun thing that we thought we would try, and now we both compete. So she also competed with me at Worlds, so it's super fun to do it with her.
That's awesome.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, we've really been excited to have you on today. I think that this has been really educational, not only for us in terms of seeing how someone like you has recovered from this operation. One of the things as surgeons, I think that we experience is that we see patients at the time of their injury, and then we see them at these time points after an operation, but we're not seeing them on a day-to-day basis, when they're recovering. And so much of the recovery happens at home or happens at a rehab unit. And I think it's really important not only for us to see what that rehab is like, but also for everyone else who might have injuries like this at home or elsewhere. So thank you for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to share it.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, everyone. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Follow Kaitlin on Instagram below. You'll see her tag down there. And don't forget to like and subscribe. All right. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Next time.
Bye-bye.